All right, welcome. As people start to roll in here, we're gonna put a little bit of an intro in the chat for people who are starting to join, so that we can gather names, I think. All right, welcome. While Charisse gets her info into the chat so we can get to know you as we jump on in, we will say hello to everybody and welcome you all here. Thrilled to have everybody here on a Monday afternoon and to be thinking together about data science education in some new ways. I'm Chad Dorsey. I'm president of the Concord Consortium and thrilled to be able to help make this convening happen. But really what's going to happen is the great stuff because of everybody in this room. So we've got some marvelous people who will share a lot of perspectives on where they are and have been in this growing field. But we also want to hear from you, your questions and ideas, and hopefully you'll come away with new ones. So I'm going to hand it over to Kate Miller, who can help facilitate our show of lots of great people and information, and we'll see you as we go along.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kate Miller. I also work at the Concord Consortium. The facilitators in this workshop are going to kind of introduce ourselves as we go. And so you'll get to meet all of us at some point. But here is the facilitation team. So as you're seeing everybody as we're speaking up, and we will be sharing the slide deck at the end so that you'll be able to track down all of this information as we go along. So I am going to start us off by just sort of framing our initial conversation is going to be around the state of the field in data science education research at the K through 12 level. And I'm going to hand it off to Nick Horton. And I'm going to let him introduce himself and sort of talk about some of the work that's been happening here. And Nick, when you want me to advance the slides, just say next slide and I will do so. So Nick, go ahead.
Well, Kate, thank you very much. I'm really excited to be here and to build on some of the exciting things that many of those in the room have been doing, and that I'm really hoping that we can all continue to move forward. I'm a professor of statistics and data science at Amherst College. I'm the co-chair of the National Academy's Committee on Applied Theoretical Statistics. I was a member of the Data Science for Undergraduates Consensus Report team, and I was proud to be able to co-chair with Michelle Wilkerson from Berkeley the workshop on K-12 data science education that was put together last fall with a number of folks present and involved in presentations and the like. And I think this quote captures that we're at a time when we really need to kind of figure things out, think deeply and creatively about how data science looks. If you go to the next slide, please, Kate. We really, as we thought about the planning for this, we thought about four kind of key opportunities and challenges that existed. The first one really at the fore was to make sure that we don't just reinvent the disparities we've seen in STEM education, that we really need to kind of be focusing early and often on how things are organized to avoid that same kind of disparities. And there's some work that's referenced in the report that I'll talk about in a minute. That really was there. The second point was really thinking about the tools and technologies. We live at a time where these open source to a large extent or open access resources are available that can really help learners and instructors alike. We really need to think thirdly about pathways that are going to be for data science. It's been very much a kind of a patchwork of things, and that we really need to kind of ensure a trained set of instructors. Professional development, teacher training is going to be really important. Our statement of task is given here. I won't read through the parts and pieces. It's all available in that report. But we really wanted to be focused on trying to kind of bring together experts, bring together examples and the like that can help students build some framework. I like thinking about this in terms of what I put on the bottom there, the idea of data literacy for everyone, data fluency as you start getting more practice with data questions, kind of extracting meaning from data, towards the point where eventually, hopefully, people are developing data acumen. That was the phrase we had at the undergraduate level that I think is relevant. But again, lots of kind of questions and parts and pieces here. The report is available. Next slide, please. So I don't want to belabor things at some level, except this is last year. We saw all the exciting things going on. Zarek and the crew at Data Science for Everyone were helping to kind of collect a whole bunch of information about how standards, credentialing, course pilots, sequences, and technology were shaping up. Since then, I think we've filled in a huge number of states and other activities. Next slide, please. And that was really presented what was available circa September of 2022 in this report. Now, the report is available for free download. There's other parts and pieces in there. There's 4 commission papers. Some of the people in the room helped to put those together. We have other kinds of parts and pieces there building on the National Academy's 2018 report. And I'm hopeful for other things in the future. But I think this captured a moment of time, some really exciting things going on. And that's what I really wanted to try to do in my couple minutes that I was allocated. Kate, back to you.
Thank you, Nick. That was great. So for everyone on the call, if you're not familiar with this report, it's a great sort of place to get a really good sense of the state of the field in DSE K through 12. And as Nick said, it's available for free. And we are making this slide deck available to everyone. So you'll be able to use the link to access that. I wanted to just follow up on what Nick was saying. I'm noticing lots of chat in the chat, which is great. I love that everybody's connecting with each other. But I did just want to just follow up on what Nick was saying, in that this is, as I'm sure all of you know, because you're here, has become a really relevant topic in education research. And this is just sort of a collection of pictures and screenshots from different DSE presentations and gatherings over the last year, sort of in the research world and conferences. So, I had the pleasure of getting to go to AERA and ISLS in the last few months, and we had DSE convenings, meetups at both of those, and there was a lot of interest. There was a lot of different research presentations on data science ed at the K through 12 level. And so for those of you who are sort of thinking that you want to pursue this field, it's definitely a really ripe time to be doing so, as there's a lot of really exciting work happening in this space. So given that we sort of want to provide you all with some time to interact and ask questions and share some sort of problems of practice questions, we wanted to give you some space to focus in a little bit more within data science ed. And so we are going to provide some breakout rooms. And we actually blew through all of those introductions faster than I thought we were going to, which is great because it gives us a little bit more time, I think, in these breakout rooms. So what we're going to do here is there are 4 breakout rooms, and they will become available in a minute. And everybody should be able to choose which one they want to go to. And so we're going to have, and I'm just going to give a quick overview of each of them. The first one, designing DSE within and across disciplines. That one will be facilitated by Chad Dorsey, who you just met, Nick Horton, who you just met, and Dr. Seth Jones. And they will be sort of talking about what we mean when we say DSE and how we think about it and define it. The second breakout room will be supporting teachers for teaching DSE, and that will be facilitated by myself and Kirsten Daehler from West Ed. And then the third one is diversity, equity, and inclusion in DSE, which will be talking about DEI and equity and sort of how we're thinking about equity in data science education and using data science education for education equity. And that will be facilitated by Louie and Letitia Perez. And then the final breakout room will be focused on tools and sort of tool design for data science ed. And that room will be facilitated by Josh Rosenberg and David Weintrop. So it's a choose your own adventure. So everybody should feel free to jump into whichever breakout room they are most interested in having a conversation about. Within those breakout rooms, the facilitators will introduce themselves a bit more, give you a little bit more information about them. And then there will be space for discussions. Thank you, Charisse. The breakout rooms will last about, I would say 45 minutes. So we'll come back together at, hi everyone, welcome back. I was in the middle of a sentence. I don't know if that happened to everyone else.
I was just going to say, you know, the sign of a good breakout room when you get caught mid-sentence. That's great.
So I'm hoping, sorry, I'm hoping that was useful for everyone. I'm actually going to hand it off to Kirsten, who's going to lead us a little bit in like a sort of collective debrief discussion about that, which, you know, will hopefully give people an opportunity to reflect a bit and share out additional thoughts and questions that they might not have gotten to in their breakout room.
Yeah, great. Do you want to just share that one slide that has
I
a couple of
can.
questions on it? That would be great. I think the things we're what, you know, since some of us wanted to be in multiple rooms, we're wanting to hear, you know, what were some of the things that you heard in your room that, you know, that were highlights, either connections that you made or something new that made you think about, and, you know, thinking about your breakout room, like what was especially useful to you? So I think we should, it's more fun to do this in an organic manner and not, you know, sort of room by room reporting back or whatnot. So I would just invite you to popcorn out. If there's something you heard from somebody else in one of the rooms that you were in, please just unmute and jump in and share what you heard for the value of all of us.
Okay, so I'm not shy. I'm Holly Lynn from NC State. And I think just an overall sharing of just as far as who was represented in our room, that it was an interdisciplinary room, and it was a multi-career path room and different phases of our careers room. And so I think that tells me that there is that the interest and work going on in the data science education space spans a lot of spans multiple disciplines, different pathways, and we all come to it from different perspectives, and we bring that as we need to embrace that as a richness rather than a feeling of disjointness.
It's a nice warm feeling. That's the way I felt at NASM when I was there. It felt like a big tent. I see your hand up, Ido. Do you want to jump in?
Sure. Yeah, I was in the tools breakout, and I learned about this cool paper that came out recently. It was presented at ISLS from David Weintrop's group, and Rotem, who is the first author, is here as well, which compare different tools that are being used in introductory data science courses. And I found it helpful because I was not aware of many of these tools. And clearly there is a trade-off. There is no one tool that is perfect, but one question that I started thinking about is whether we need more tools or are there more work into these existing tools. And one other idea to share is that perhaps we do need more tools, but specifically for non-standard data like text-based data, which is a bit quite different than numerical data, and perhaps we need more tools for that.
Well, I know later in our time together, we'll share some of the resources of tools that we've pooled. And I think it's just an ever-growing list. And so it'll be interesting to see what else people know about. Some other highlights.
I'll throw out a thought from our group that I think relates to the two things that were just shared. Holly Lynn, in our group, we also had a lot of diversity back in terms of backgrounds and career trajectories. And of course, ours was in what does data science education mean across these different contexts. And one thing that struck me is that I've noticed I'm regularly in a conversation where someone asks the question, how is data science education any different than, and then they fill in some more established discipline there. And what struck me in our group was that oftentimes I hear that more established discipline as statistics education. So how is data science education any different than statistics education? Occasionally I'll hear it as computer science education. How is it any different than computer science education? It just so happened the group that we had, the question that kept on coming up is, how is data science education any different than science education? Like just science modeling. So I think the fact that that question comes up, that so many disciplines recognize the things that we're doing and say, oh yeah, that's my thing. I totally agree with Holly Lynn that that's something to embrace and not quickly try and squeeze or narrow down. But I also think it's something to explore and try and answer some of those questions. What are the things that we're talking about that are different than what statistics education has been talking about for, multiple decades now?
Seth, that made me think about UC Berkeley having, opened up a new college, that one they haven't opened up a new one in 50 years. And so it's a data science education, but the way in which they describe it is really in this interdisciplinary way, not just for people who, are in computer science space and whatnot. So I think there's a lot there that we could build on. Yes, Kate.
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback off of that. This came up in our breakout room as well, as we were just talking about data science ed for, thinking about supporting teachers for it, and like really the interdisciplinary nature of data science ed. And I think, as Seth was saying, that the fact that so many different sort of more established disciplines are asking how data science ed is different from their discipline really, I think, speaks to the way that it is different, which is that it touches all of them. And so when you're thinking about data science ed as its own entity, it really is this interdisciplinary space that pulls from computer science education, from science education, from statistics education. And so, I think a lot of people that are working on DSE right now and thinking about it, it really is like, how do we sort of define DSE in its own space that is agnostic to the discipline in which it is landing in. So yeah, I just, I wanted to piggyback off of that and think about it. And Leti, I see your hand up too.
I was just thinking about, had the pleasure of sitting in a room with Susan and Joe, just on the other side. The way that I came to data science is because I was invited into the space. And so the need for opportunities to invite classroom teachers like Susan, who's both pursuing her PhD and is a classroom teacher, to from all of these different disciplines into more spaces like this to really help this initial shaping, because we're talking about a really rigid system across the United States in terms of disciplines being very siloed and credentialing, and just really making sure that their voices are elevated in all of these conversations. So it's a pleasure. Thank you.
Can I piggyback off of that comment and the one that was prior? Yeah, it was great to talk with Susan, who is a science teacher and has been grappling with not only as she works on her dissertation, but integrating data into the earth sciences and physics. And one equity issue that came up was when students come in with such different math preparation. And so going back to this question, yes, data science is interdisciplinary, but at the core, especially in K through 12 spaces, mathematics and statistical skills are really fundamental. And when students are coming in at such different levels into a different space like science, where you're really needing to apply some of these skills and some of the prerequisites, people are not in the same places, then what do you do? And so issues of equity come up. Well, if you're not going to try to teach data literacy or data science in a separate course, and you are trying to integrate it into other core classes, then, but we didn't solve the challenge here. We didn't come up with a great solution, but that is something to really continue to grapple with. And we talked about how math and science teachers ideally need to continue to talk with each other. These departments in K through 12 spaces need to continue to collaborate so that some of those prerequisites there can be more coordination in the learning of some of these basic skills so they can be applied, and that there may need to be a culture shift in both those spaces where dealing with real world messy data is very different from the neat, cut, dry problem sets that you'll come across in math and oftentimes in science too.
I'm gonna,
I
sorry,
wanted,
go
I
ahead,
wanted
Chad.
to advocate for Ben because he was in our group and I know he's in the car, but also wanted to ask him about his chat question about informal data makerspaces in K-12 because I'm fascinated by all those words in the same sentence. Can you say anything more, Ben, about your what you've done with things in that direction in other places with other ideas?
Sorry, I had to step away for a second, but about data makerspaces in K-12, the comment.
Yeah, or the other ways in which that notion has been popular for you.
Yeah, so I guess I wonder if the classroom is the best environment in which to learn data science, I guess. I think that is a reasonable question to ask, and what parts of it are most conducive to the classroom and which parts of it would be better suited in informal learning environments. So it's very difficult in the workplace to foster data culture too. So I've worked at Purdue in the data space and at Clemson now, sort of institution wide. And so how do you get executive leadership all the way down to IT professionals and people in the functional areas who need to understand data to run a university to see both the big picture and be able to execute on the pragmatics? So this data makerspace thing, I don't know, I haven't seen it in the literature yet, but it's the same idea as having a makerspace that could be whatever you need it to be. And so for our case, we brought professionals together who sit at the hub of data for a lot of different units. And we ask the big questions. We're pretty good at that at universities, but we're not good at really connecting all the dots. And so in a very safe way, in a very sandboxy way, we bring data together and do the actual types of statistical analysis and the actual type of mappings and the actual type of data cleanup that are needed to make these things go. In no way a production ready kind of environment, but it gives people optics on the system and makes it real and tangible, just like any other rapid prototyping environment. So I was curious, I guess, if there are frameworks for that in any other informal learning environments in K-12. It works well for us in my role. Just otherwise it moves the ball forward, I suppose. So that's really all I've got on data makerspaces. I want that. I'm trying to invest in that. I'd like K-12 to invest in that idea too, I guess.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's really interesting.
Sorry, Chad, did you have a response that you wanted to?
No, I was just saying thanks. That's awesome.
Yeah, I certainly, I think that that's a really excellent point, in terms of thinking about what of this belongs in classrooms and what, could potentially be addendum addressed in sort of the informal out of school time spaces. I think there are a few things that, I'm thinking about and listening to that. One is, I don't know if you're familiar, I know Justice Toshiba Walker, who's is anybody here from his team?
Yes, I can.
Yes, Reza, awesome. I don't know if you want to address a little bit what your team has been working on, because I know you've been working a bit in that space of sort of, right, the makerspace, out of school time, thinking about computational thinking and data.
So Justice Walker has couple of projects. I'm working with one of his project is like coding like a data miner. But he had like what you mentioned, the makerspace and all those things. I knew a little bit about those things, but I can share the coding like a data miner project, which is focusing on the high school teachers and high school students. We worked with already a couple of teachers and students from El Paso, Texas region. And the focus on this project is the whole thing of data science, I will say. How students will mine the data, how students will prepare the data analysis part and the visualization. I will share the link. Already someone shared the link in the chat, so you can visit that website. But the focus is on one part, the tweeted data. here we have focused on Twitter data to understand the students' different perspective on cultural, socio-political views, but it can be changed to other part of the data also. But the key things in this project, we are looking how we can generate, how can we create a data science-based curriculum that can be taught in K-12 curriculum in the high school.
Thanks, Reza. I know, Justice was at Penn with me, and he did a lot of his work in sort of out of school time spaces. And there are definitely other people who are thinking about this, Tammy Clegg, Kayla DesPortes and her team, in terms of how we can bring data science ed into the informal out of school time spaces. I also know that there are like science museums that are starting to think more about this. The American Museum of Natural History in New York City just added a whole new education building, and within that there is a room that they are calling the Learning with Data Lab. So they are, really thinking about how to bring data science ed into their out of school time projects as well. So I love that question, Ben, about, like if we are sort of acting within the system that exists, right, that is so siloed, how can we rely on some of the out of school time spaces to do some of that really, really interdisciplinary work?
Well, we have the opportunity. I think, have we heard from each of the rooms? Was there more in the DEI room, Letitia and Joe, to share? Trying to think, we heard from all of the rooms.
We did.
Yeah, okay. Well, I guess one thing that as I'm listening and thinking about the purpose of this gathering was to think about, spaces for more work, for added research, for early career folks to think about where you might enter in and where that space might be. And I wonder if we just take a minute to think about that question, and then put into the waterfall, like into the chat, and then we'll waterfall it out. Where do you see opportunities for further research? Like what is just rich for more research and more learning? So take a minute and think, and then type something in chat, and then we'll see what our collective wisdom might say before we go on to the next part. Hey, do you have ideas? Go ahead in 3, 2, 1. So the prompt is, what is a space that you feel like is rich for more research in the data science education world? We can see the collective wisdom of all our ideas. Engaging in data science outside of the classic statistics, computer science, math. I had something similar. Supporting non-STEM teachers to see the value.
Oh yeah, Chad, I like that. The tension between foundational mathematics understanding and disciplinary practices. Yep.
Yeah, we had some interesting conversation around that in our room that came back around in this conversation here, I think.
David,
yeah, I was gonna say, Holly Lynn, the teacher learning trajectory or trajectories, it feels like there's so many different entry points to be thinking about what are, fruitful path forwards, typical class paths forward, and really different approaches in. Oh, Letitia, do you want to say a bit more about yours?
Well, I'm really curious about kind of outside the traditional STEM spaces. So I've been wondering about how data and social emotional learning and ways of belonging and knowing, how we could really co-situate those things, since there are a lot of support for that, and it wouldn't have to be within a certain math class or science class. And so I have a lot of wonderings, and that goes along with the maker space, because there are a lot of maker spaces and 3D printers that are laying idle around the land. And how could we get those 3D printers and 3D volumes into kind of data spaces? So lots of thinking about that.
I was thinking about the data stories, data storytelling as well. Just I think there's a lot of wealth of knowledge and expertise that the teachers have, and to have them help to share those stories of what they're doing, what's working, where they're noticing kids get stuck, where they notice that they're having to make, pedagogical decisions and choices, and the power of telling stories, and what you can bring about as change, or show through storytelling. I don't know if Cherise, if there were other things you wanted to add there, but your comment caught my attention.
I think applying those understandings of critical data storytelling, like what's in the data, what's not in the data, how can we notice the patterns here and build on them in context. I think that's going to be, I'm really excited to do that work in out of school settings where there may be different motivations for pursuing these that are not just like, I have to learn the skills just to learn the skills, but they're actually contextualized. In my particular context, I'm specifically looking at youth journalists, ages 14 to 25, who are telling stories. And I think in this age of disinformation and like, what is truth, what is real, where do we back up our facts and embody reasoning, this is like, it's a useful, very useful tool and field, right, to help with real world problems.
Thank you. David, I see you have your hand up too. Do you want to jump in?
Yeah, just one quick thing I wanted to mention, in part from what people have just been sharing and these ideas that have come up, and also based on some recent experiences at a conference, is just to bring forward the idea that a challenge of data science and data science education being so interdisciplinary is that it means to answer meaningful kind of core questions in this space requires interdisciplinary teams. So this is coming from a conference where there are a bunch of designers and data scientists who built these super cool data science tools, but don't have the methodological or kind of theoretical background to kind of answer them in a satisfying way that we might as data science education researchers. Or likewise, kind of people in the weeds with data science education might not kind of have the background in teacher preparation, teacher professional development to support that side of it. And so just kind of acknowledging that to really move forward the community, the need for these interdisciplinary teams that kind of bring together people with all these different perspectives around learning, around teaching and pedagogy, around tool design. I mean, it's going to kind of take voices from all those different perspectives, and especially like moving out of the STEM context and thinking critically about DEI or social emotional learning. Like all these different perspectives come with, are just going to require people with those different expertises. And so thinking up front as projects are getting built about explicitly bringing in those voices and perspectives and sets of expertise.
Yeah, so interesting. In one of our projects, we've been thinking about whether or not you talk about the data fluency of individuals or of a classroom or a group of people, especially if people are coming with different areas of expertise and different angles into the whole. So is it a collective knowledge set or skill set? Kate.
I love that framing, Kirsten. And, I think as David was talking and also relating back to something we talked a bit about in our room as well, and just in conversations I've been having about sort of supporting teachers for this work is, exactly when it is so interdisciplinary, the teachers need to sort of have these additional pieces of knowledge from outside of, potentially outside of their training or their previous experience. And thinking about when you are working with data science ed, one of the sort of main tenets of that is that you're working with this real complex data that it's from the world, relates to the world, and can be used to make change in the world. And basically, anytime you're doing that, you have human biases and things like that come into the data, and that is a piece that when you're doing data science well can't be ignored. And so, even when we think about math and science teachers who may know the data analysis skills and the data cycle and all of those things. But if they're dealing with this real data, all of a sudden they're having to sort of explore these questions of, racial bias or, like other socio sort of scientific issues. And so, I think that that's a real unique piece of data science ed that is both really interesting to explore and to research and to think about, but also makes it difficult.
Yeah, it makes me think about some of the work that the team at WestEd has done in the Data Fluency Project around principles of data-rich instruction, which get at issues of humanizing data, and asking those questions as part of the data explorations, and then as an educator thinking about how to deal with the context of inequities. So I'm noticing the time, Kate, and you probably are too. And we wanted to share a bunch of resources which are on slides, which we will give people access to. So it'll be a quick I don't know, review of the terrain and places that people can dig in some more. So I'll give back to you, Kate.
Yeah, so we're going to take a little break from the discussion too, because I know a lot of you have been asking for more details, more information about resources. We got a lot of questions about that in the pre-survey as well. So we're going to take the next 20 minutes or so to just do some quick overview of like the so many resources that are available in DSE. And then we'll have some more time at the end for you to process and ask any additional questions that you have. We're not going to go through these in a ton of detail because, like I said, we will be making the slide deck available to you. And so all of these slides that are coming up are full of links. So we're not going to open them all for you now, but we will share the slide deck so that you can open them all later and explore them. But we do just want to sort of give you a framing. So I'm going to hand it off first to Seth, who's going to talk a little bit about, as you're thinking about this work, conferences, journals, and things like that, that you can be looking at.
Yep. So as many of us have said throughout this, hopefully you're hearing the message that our main goal today is just about connection, community building, especially for early career people, identifying places where their interests could take root and grow. And so one of the big questions anybody in this work has to answer is, where are people talking about this? What conferences, what journals, where should I be reading? Where should I be going? Where should I be sending my stuff? And given the conversation we just had, it might not be surprising that the answer is all over the place. So this is by no means meant to be comprehensive, but myself and David and Josh Rosenberg put our head together and tried to think about, what are the conferences and journals that we know about where issues around data science education are being talked about, where you can learn what kind of work is being done, where you can share the work that you're doing. And so I'm not going to talk through everything across these two slides on conferences, but I do think one thing I want to highlight here is I've started thinking about some of the bigger conferences that have lots of disciplines in the same place all at once. So that's why we have AERA here first. And I think that Kate is doing some work maybe to even have a new special interest group around data science education, which would be great because right now AERA is wonderful. You can go there and hear science education people talk about data, computer science education people, math education people, social studies, literacy. But the downside is it's enormous. And when you're submitting something, it's not entirely clear where to submit it. Like, where will people want to hear about this? So there are people, Kate, that's doing work to try and create a very clear space so you could be there, but also find things in other areas too. And then we tried to think about the different sort of disciplinary conferences where these ideas are happening. Of course, statistics education conferences, math education conferences, and they each have their own pros and cons from our perspective, that there's a certain kind of version of this you're going to get there, but then there's other questions that community might not be talking about and asking a lot about right now. So you can go to the next slide. So we have science education conferences here, computer science education conferences, and human-computer interaction. And I want to hand it off to David. David, if you want to talk a little bit about the computer science conferences there, if you want to slide straight into the journals.
Yeah, I mean, Seth, I think you did a nice job setting this up and kind of highlighting different different kind of historical communities that touch on data science, and they kind of have their own conferences and meeting spaces. And then, yeah, data science is an emerging place at the intersection of all these things. I think we can just hop to the next slide. And like Seth, so we started to put together a list of journals that are either explicitly focusing on data science education, like Journal of Statistics and Data Science Education, which might be the only journal that has data science education in its title as like those three words together in a row. But also like the Journal of Learning Sciences and British Journal of Educational Technology that both had special issues focused on data science education in the recent past, which is a encouraging sign for this community, showing kind of a growing recognition that there's interest in work happening in this space. I mean, the thing I really want to highlight in these journals, and Kate, you can actually hop to the next slide as well, is to ask, kind of to do a little bit of crowdsourcing, which is to ask you guys if you know that there are emerging data science education friendly venues, kind of recognizing that, right, math that is increasingly interested, computer science that is increasingly interested in this space, education broadly, just journals interested in this space. So if folks, well, again, we'll share these slides. So if folks know of venues, journals or conferences where this conversation is taking place that isn't captured on these 4 slides that Seth, Josh, and I put together, please just drop them in the chat, and then we'll continue to, we'll update these slides. And so kind of coming back to them, there might be a few more resources. But yeah, this is a start in terms of places to look, both for places to submit, but also kind of if you're reviewing, looking for work that's happened in this space, please drop them in the chat. Yeah, and with that, I will pass the mic. I apologies, forget who's next on the agenda.
That's okay. I think we have.
It's me, I think.
Yeah, and I think that we had one more slide here, Kate.
Did we? Oh, yeah, we did.
Oh, yeah. So we, all of us, we just wanted to get to the end of that because it can feel overwhelming to not be really sure where to be reading or where to be submitting your things. But like Holly Lynn said earlier, I really think right now that it's something to lean into as an opportunity, that there's so many different perspectives speaking into it, and that everyone that I've ever encountered wants those multiple perspectives. And so don't see the diversity and think, oh, I don't really fit into this. See it all and think, oh, this is a place that's welcoming someone like me to come be a part of the work they're doing.
And I did see that Katherine put a note in the chat about practitioner focused work, and I think that that's definitely, we've got NSTA and CSTA and NCTM, which are sort of the computer science teacher, and math teacher conferences, and they all have sort of their own journals as well that they're working with. So the next thing I wanted to show, and I hope that I can just click it and open it up here, but one of the things that Concord has been working on recently, and that we're sort of like slowly starting to share it. It's still very much in beta form, but we are pulling together a data science education research community of practice database that's focused on data science ed at the K through 12 level. And so I'm going to see if I can did that work? Yes. Can you all see it now? Awesome. So again, this link will be available to you all in the slide deck that we're going to share, but I just wanted to draw everyone's attention to this. The idea of this database is to just sort of start collecting the work that's being done in data science education at the K through 12 level. We have collected, it's about 160 or so journal articles that have been published on DSE at the K through 12 level. And we've created this database that links those journal articles to the people that are publishing in this space, and then also to their collaborators. So the idea is to sort of start figuring out what the network looks like, and also provide a place for people to come for resources, and also to find out like who they might want to reach out to collaborate with. And so what, it's currently, there's Holly Lynn right there up at the top. But this is collecting, and Joe is in here. I think actually all of our facilitators are in here somewhere. This is a place to go to think about who you might want to be interested in collaborating with, and also as a resource that is collecting these journals. And in the slide deck here, we also have forms where you can submit suggestions for articles that we don't have in our database yet. And also, if you find yourself in the database and like any information about it is wrong, you can fill out a form to fix that. So I just wanted to share.
Click back
Yeah.
onto a contact card just to show how you can.
Oh
walk
yeah,
through.
right,
The
right.
thing that's
Yes,
been
thank
most
you.
useful for me is to see that you can walk through from somebody's onto their papers and then all their co-collaborators as well. So you start to get a picture of what the community is looking like. And also, if you like somebody's work, you may be able to find other people whose work is going in that direction.
Exactly. Yeah. So here, Holly Lynn, I'm calling you out. So here's Holly Lynn's contact card, and you can see that it's got information about her, and then the publications that are in our database that she's published, and all of the other co-authors on all of those articles. So it, gives you, and you can just click through. So I can click on this one, and then, oh, I can see who she, and so you can just sort of, it really allows you the space to just sort of explore this network in a real network way. All right. So that's the database that we wanted to share, and I'm going to pass it off next to Chad to talk about funding and grant opportunities.
All right, we'll just take a few minutes for the most important part of this all we know, which is how the heck do we get more of this work to happen? This may be familiar to many, to others it may not be, and for the record, for those who are visiting this afterwards, just a useful resource to kind of gather these together. This is all NSF funding. Cadre is helping put this together too. There is other funding that isn't here, but is a little bit less clear in some of the places. So anyway, people may know about some of these. You may not know about all of them, but as a quick reminder, there are a number of NSF programs that are funding education research, and a good chunk of them are amenable to data science education research. There's not a one place that is funding data science education research proper, but that might be one of the outgrowths of some of the work that we all do if we yell loudly enough. For example, iTest is a great place to look at things that might be in informal settings as well as formal settings. It's very amenable to and focused on underrepresented, underserved groups. So things about sort of equity concerns might fit well in iTest. Community partnerships is a big part of that. So people who are interested in looking at sort of how people engage with their communities in general, that sort of work would be well suited to iTest. That happens in mid-August. There are 3 different project types and a pretty decent range of awards sizes for that. If you're really looking to dig in on research with a capital R, core is the real place to go. So if you want to know, a couple of the ones that we have are how do students think about hierarchical nested data? How do anybody think about data that varies in space and time? These sort of broad foundational questions in the field. And I heard a number of them happening here today. That's a place where EDU core research comes into play. It's interesting to note that doesn't also have to be formal settings. It can be informal settings. It can be even adult learners in many cases. And they've started to focus it on a couple different directions, including broadening participation. That's early October. And there are small to medium to large grants there. Next slide has a couple more. So DRK-12, you may know well. If you don't, you should. Cadre is the sort of hub for DRK-12 work, and it's really the biggest program in ed research. It's focused on both research and development. As it mentions, it's about K-12. It's about formal classroom learning, and at least in some way, you've got to be connected to that. It's recently been refocused and recast deadline-wise. So it's now November 8th, which is wonderful for those who want to submit things in the October deadline as well as a November deadline. The 2 things to note about it. Number one, it's got 3 different levels, including things that are exploratory. So if you're looking for an interesting idea that you think is not quite is sort of so full that you can make a big $3 million proposal around it, that's a good place to go. And the other one that is notable, who may not have seen it, is that there's a new project type called partnership development, which is about developing partnerships with schools and otherwise. This is really the answer to the how do I get started with an RPP if I don't have a partnership? You can develop one. 1-year grants, $100,000, only 8-page proposal. Great opportunity to start to dig in and find people of a like mind, especially practitioners. People mentioned informal. We didn't talk a lot about that here today, but I think there's a lot of good work happening in that. And without the strictures of the classroom, that's a place to go. AZEL is a program that's really been interested in data science ed in a lot of projects that we've seen so far. And there's a whole range of ways to connect in with that. They're more and more interested in research in the AZEL program over the years. So that makes some of this work very amenable to AZEL. And then the last one's got a couple of these examples here. So here's a couple that might be either farther afield or closer to home, depending upon who you are. There is a program, there has been a program called REDL, which is the new cyber learning, for those of you who remember that. That's about out there technologies and how they fit places. So people talking about these new tools, REDL might be a place to go for a crazy tool, especially if it's standing upside down in your head using AI, XR, and VR, and then it's perfect. They're really looking for out there technologies, but there's a lot of ground to be had in that. Currently, we're waiting on a new solicitation, I think, for that. To mark my words on it, but it's a program that has been going on and ended, but I don't think it's closed. I'm sure they're coming out with a new one. And then for those of you who are interested in doing this in undergrad, we focus a lot here on K-12. The IU's program is a great place to go, especially for folks who are really kind of digging in your own institution, who are trying to sort of get started with this. IU's really has a lot of awards, and they're focused on projects. I mean, research is important, but it's not, it's not beholden to, methodology, to be, as a be all end all. So it's a really great place to say, hey, I think this could be really cool. What if we tried it? And the other thing to note about IU's is it's also interested in transforming institutions. So if you've got a good thing going and you want to get some other institutions on the bandwagon, IU's is a great place to go for that. So there's a quick roundup. There are probably other places to go. If you know of good funding, please put it in the chat. The last thing I'll say is that the Department of Education, thanks to some of the folks who work on the inside, is also continued to be interested in data science education and more. There was an unsolicited call for those that was somewhat successful recently. I would be on the lookout, because I think there's going to be stuff coming down the pike through the Department of Education that'll be fairly, at least friendly, and maybe very specifically tilted toward data science education in K-12.
Thanks, Chad. Next, I'm going to hand it to Kirsten, who's going to talk about curriculum and tools.
Okay, well, it's a laundry list, I would say, and maybe one of the best ways into a laundry list is to have some sort of sorting mechanism. So on this slide, I suggested start here. Thanks again to Data Science for Everyone. But if you look on that first slide, that resource, oh, thank you. That's exactly what I was going to pull up and share. You're a step ahead of me. You can see that there is a tab for teaching data science, and there you can sort by 3 different mechanisms, by a grade level, or you can choose a category. The filter my name wasn't working this weekend. I'm not sure who I let know about that, but it's a good place to get started. And I think, when you look in there, it's a little bit hard to sort, because sometimes a group or a project might have a variety of things. They might have a wide grade band spread, or they might have, full units, or they might have just smaller activities and all. But you can see that there's quite a few listings here. So I'd say it's a good place to start. And then in compiling this list, it just did one of 2 things. Started with a Data Science for Everyone, because they've been doing a great job of collecting resources. But when you get in there, you'll see that a lot of them are math or computer science or statistics related. So if you go to the next slide, Course Kata is an example of, here's a full interactive online textbook, with more than 1,000 formative assessment questions, etc. But then when you look a little deeper, you'll find projects and resources that are not in there yet. So like passion-driven statistics, that came from a reference list during NASM. So what we did to augment this list that is not yet in the DS4E database is we collected ideas from NASM and then others that we knew about. So skew the scripts there, tried to put in where we could a little bit more context and link. So these are other math focused tools. On the next page, the ones I've listed here are science focused. These are ones that are not yet in the DS4E. So DS4E folks can take note and reach out. I think that you'll find a lot around data visualizations, Earth system science data in a number of the resources that are out there. And then I'd go to one site, like for example, CIRC. I didn't know that Carleton College was doing so much in earth science, data science work. So that was a fun find for me. So I put them on there. They have got a couple of different projects and a tool book. Let's see. Next page. Yeah. So then there was a whole bunch of other, everything from, ways to use US Census data, other kind of just tools like slow reveal graphs, the whole sort of pedagogical approach of slow reveal. So it's just an instructional routine that promotes sense making. There's a lot of conversation today about sense making through data. There's power of data science, PBL models. Makeover Monday was fun. It's just a community that comes together every Monday and they work on a particular data set and talk through it. So if you're into Python, Anaconda, there's a platform for sort of everything Python related. Next slide. And then there are, a host of tools. Some of these are in the DS4E, but a couple I wanted to highlight, like for example, you may know CodeApp, but you may not know the story builder side of CodeApp. So Charisse, I was thinking about you in terms of, what are tools that help support telling of stories with data and allow that data to then still be accessible. There's other ways of looking at data that's linked to maps like Glue and FieldScope, a map-based data collection. I know that FieldScope as a tool has also made modifications so that Indigenous groups may want to share data about their space, but not share it broadly with everybody. And so FieldScope has gone in and worked with different communities to use the tool and modify for those purposes. So this is not by any means an exhaustive list, but there's a lot out there and more being added all the time. So please feel free to add what you know in the chat. I think maybe encourage people to submit to DS4E so that we have that as a. I'm gonna
pass this off to Zarek when we're done. And
okay, great.
some of these. But yeah, definitely if you have other tools and curriculum that are, ready to be shared that aren't on this list, please drop them in the chat. We'll collect those and add them to this slide deck before we send it out.
And just to be clear, this list has nothing to do with opportunities for yourself to learn more about data science. That's a whole nother tab. So
yeah, these are sort of curriculum tools as you're thinking about things to use, when you're working with students and teachers in DSE. So I think there was one more. Yeah. So I just wanted to give a shout out to, there are sort of two great places to stay connected to a lot of what's happening in this field. One is the Concord Consortium mailing list. If you, again, we'll share the slide deck, but if you click join there, it'll send you to the place, and there's just a selection for data science education, and that there's an email that goes out approximately every couple months that just sort of collects different resources and ideas. And then Data Science for Everyone, which really brings together practitioners, researchers, policymakers, just sort of across the spectrum of people thinking about data science education, has a really active Slack channel that is great and is a place where people are constantly sharing new research that they're doing, opportunities for webinars, workshops, and other things like that. So if you aren't yet a part of the Data Science for Everyone Slack channel, that is a great place to sort of continue to stay connected and you know, gain access to different workshops and things that are happening. So we have just a few minutes left. And so I know that that was a ton of information that we just threw at everyone. And so we just wanted to give some space for questions about anything that we've talked about so far today, any lingering questions that you have. Yeah, that's a great question about DS4E that I don't know the answer to. Who here is familiar with that?
Yeah, no, it's
right?
been developed. It's developed over the years. It's not part of a specific conference. It's an independent coalition that is a sort of co-steering group with the University of Chicago and us and some others, and then it's found its home at University of Chicago and is now adjacent, University of Chicago adjacent as a coalition. It focuses a lot on the sort of awareness building. They're focused on also on policy and sort of building connections across the country in terms of moving programs and things forward. And they have some good connections. Zarek, who leads that, was also a fellow at the NCER and the IES in Department of Education for a year before he came back and started that as well, and continued it at least.
And I thank you to everyone who's sharing additional resources in the chat. We'll definitely collect all of those. But yeah, any sort of lingering questions, thoughts about anything that's been presented or discussed today?
Really exciting to see everybody's interest in the different ideas and work, and to get a sense of how this is moving across boundaries even more as we go along. So thank you for your interest and work. That's been exciting. It's exciting.
I have one small question, which is, I really appreciate this as a space for early career researchers. I mean, I'm in a postdoc, and I'm curious how that, like, what are you all thinking? What were you thinking in putting that together, and like any aspects of the vision for early career researchers and what role we might play in some of this?
I'll take that for a second. I mean, the goal is exactly that, to try to pull people together and to recognize that this is a field that has a lot of space for early career work because it's new to all of us. And we know that spaces like that are invigorated by people who are bringing new ideas from multiple domains. And I think that the way that we can grow the field is by making those connections strong and supporting them. So, you know, we really see this sort of as the beginning. Hopefully, not only is this giving people ideas, but it's also giving connections for people to build, you know, work across the field to make new proposals. And to find mentors, both formal and informal, as we go along. So hopefully there will be more of this, and the SIGs and meetups and things are intended in that same zone.
Yeah, and Charisse, I know, you know, we were able to connect at ISLS, which was wonderful. And I did see your question in the chat about sort of more spaces for these kinds of community gathering. And, you know, I don't know if everybody saw Chad's shout out in response to that, but we do have a group we have a number of groups working on a number of different things around this. One of which is that we have sort of a group that is thinking about a framework for learning progressions for data science at K through 12, which is something that will hopefully come out very end of this year or beginning of next year, just to sort of help the field with some cohesion. And then we also have a group that's working on an anchor conference for data science education at the K through 12 level. And, you know, more information about that will be trickling out sort of over the next few months. But the anchor conferences we're looking to launch February 2025 for like the first official sort of what will hopefully become an annual anchor conference for DS4E. But yeah, I mean, I think that one of the sort of impetuses for this is that, you know, like I am a recent, you know, like I similarly just finished my doctoral program and sort of came out of that into this space. And, you know, I'm coming across more and more, you know, doctoral candidates and students who are very interested in this space, but because it doesn't really have a cohesive home yet, there's sort of a lot of questions about like, well, like, where do I go? How do I meet people? And so just the more opportunities that we can provide for people to connect around that, I think is the goal, and will continue to be the goal of these DSE meetups that will happen at different conferences going forward. I hope that answered your question, Charisse.
Yeah, sounds great. Thank you.
Yeah. Practicing my teacher wait time. Any other questions?
I have one, Kate.
Yes.
You know, there are so many interesting people and projects that have been part of the conversation over the last, you know, hour and 3/4. And I'm wondering, will we have I don't know, a listing and connection and way to connect with people afterwards?
That is an excellent idea. And I hadn't thought of that, but yes, absolutely. I can share I have a registration list that, you know, we collected from Cadre, and I have to double check with the Cadre team that it's okay to share that, but I'm assuming that it is. And that should have everybody's, you know, the names of everybody that registered and their institutions. Yeah, so I'm happy to share that.
And for those who are at the Cadre meeting, we had deliberately had this in part because we knew not as many people were able to come to the Cadre meeting as the Cadre would have liked as well. But there is a working lunch on the second day, a structured poster session on data science education as well, and we're trying to get some informal gathering in one of the evenings. So if you are there, make sure that you connect there as well.
Excellent. All right. Well, if there aren't any other questions, we can wrap up a few minutes early. Oh, there was the question slide that I didn't even get to.
Thanks, everyone. Hope you found somebody new and some new ideas, and we will keep going from here and keep people connected and beyond.